Hi guys, my name's Emily, and today I'm here to talk to you about the Holocaust and how we represent the Holocaust in children's literature and why that matters. Today I'm going to be talking about The Boy in the Striped Pajamas by John Boyne and Briar Rose by Jane Yolen. Both of these texts are meant for children and they deal with the Holocaust in fantastic ways. So when I say fantastic, I mean it's part of the fantasy genre. So they're introducing the unreal into a very, very real historical event. There are two approaches, and the first is the approach that The Boy in the Striped Pajamas takes. So we have this narrator who is unbelievably naive for a 9-year-old, and the fantastic elements in here combined with Bruno sort of distance us from the gravity of the Holocaust. So throughout the book you hear Bruno refer to Outwith. They're living next to Outwith, the camp called Outwith. Now this is punny and works in English, but it doesn't work in German. Bruno is supposed to be a German boy speaking German, and Auschwitz doesn't translate into Outwith in German. This is not a mistake that a German boy would make. So we kind of have to suspend our disbelief there, but even as an English reader, hearing Outwith, we have to know that Auschwitz is a concentration camp to get that Bruno is talking about a concentration camp when he talks about Outwith. Then there are the people in the striped pajamas, who he envisions living in this sort of cottage country settlement on the other side of the fence and hanging out in their pajamas all day. Bruno doesn't understand that these other people are Jewish, and it's really hard to buy that a 9-year-old Jewish boy with a sister in the Hitler Youth wouldn't know the whole Nazi agenda. He's living with the commander of this camp. And so we see these people from this naive point of view, and it sort of obscures the reality of the situation, which is that real people were really dying on the other side of the fence. It doesn't really teach people what the Holocaust was and how that's impacted people even today. And then there are some of the more fantastical elements, like Bruno is able to walk up to the fence, and so is Shmuel. The realities of a concentration camp, you would never be able to leave the group and walk up to the fence and sit for hours talking to the person on the other side of the fence. I mean, for probably 99% of the book, the people on the other side of the fence aren't referred to as Jewish. This book is so divorced from the realities of the Holocaust, it's hard to understand how this could be an introduction to the Holocaust. So Jane Yolen's Briar Rose takes a different approach to the Holocaust. Again, it's for young people. It's supposed to be a sort of introduction to the Holocaust. But it's a very, very different approach. It does use the fantastic. It uses the Briar Rose Sleeping Beauty fairy tale story to sort of structure it and tie it all together. So we have Becca, who is the second generation removed from the Holocaust. So her grandmother came over to the States, and then her parents were affected by it, and she has also been affected by the Holocaust through the intergenerational traumas that are passed down. And part of that trauma is the narrative of Sleeping Beauty that motivates Becca to go back to the camp where her grandmother was and to understand what the Sleeping Beauty story means. Spoilers, she discovers that her grandmother was gassed but didn't die, and was thrown alive in a pit of dead bodies and left to die. The story of being rescued from the pit, being brought back to life with mouth to mouth, the idea of the prince's kiss waking Sleeping Beauty, that whole narrative takes on a really different and chilling meaning. And so we have the fantastic with the Sleeping Beauty story guiding the horrific realities of the Holocaust. The idea of being put in a truck and gassed and left for dead, or actually dying, that just doesn't come across in this, which is also meant for children and has fantastical elements and is an introduction to the Holocaust. We have these two very different approaches to Holocaust literature for children. Why does it matter if we teach children accurate information on the Holocaust? I mean, you hear a lot of people talking about how children are fragile and need to be protected, and I mean, reading Briar Rose as an adult and hearing about a pit of dead bodies, that was really hard. And I can't imagine being 9 or 10 and reading about humans doing that to other humans. But at the same time, I mean, we look at Boy in the Striped Pajamas and it makes the Holocaust kind of look like a fun adventure in which Bruno makes a cool friend who's stuck on the other side of the fence, and then they go on a super secret spy adventure into the camp, and it's sort of unclear, the ending. Like, if you're maybe not familiar with what happens, you probably don't get that Bruno is being gassed. So that whole reality of the situation is lost. And I mean, we don't have place names, we don't have people identified. I mean, Jewishness is not really associated with the violence that's happening, and the violence that's happening is not really dealt with in any significant way. Because it's for children, you would expect more guidance, but you almost have to be an informed reader coming into Boy in the Striped Pajamas, whereas with Jane Yolen, you really have the introduction to the Holocaust and the realities of the Holocaust. Why does it matter that we teach children accurately what happened during the Holocaust? Well, there are a couple of different opinions on this. Firstly, there are still people out there who deny that the Holocaust happened. The fact that people will deny it is a very good reason to accurately represent what happened and to accurately record these stories and to memorialize these stories. I mean, there's a big controversy right now. The Diary of Anne Frank is now technically in public domain, which means that anyone can publish it. It used to be in control of the Anne Frank estate and museum, so they had the power to control the narrative that is published. The danger with Anne Frank's diary, which as a diary holds power as a true text in the way that these fantasy texts don't, is that people can edit it any way they want and really shift the narrative. So if that's the danger with a diary, isn't there a similar danger in narratives, fictional narratives that propose to us that they are an introduction to a real historical event that don't accurately capture that historical event? The other thing that's often talked about is the importance of remembering. So we're coming to a point where the people who are alive currently were children during the Holocaust, and they're really old. Remembering these narratives as actual historical facts, because the farther we get away from these events happening, the easier it is to sort of brush it off to myth and legend. So my question, I guess, really boils down to is when we start with something fantastic already, if we start with a Holocaust narrative that's grounded in fantasy, and we're already so many generations removed from the actual history, what does that do to the narrative? What does that do to how we understand the narrative 10 years from now, 15 years from now? Chances are the people who experience the Holocaust will be deceased. What if this is their only encounter with narratives of the Holocaust? Like, what does that do to the narrative of the Holocaust as a historical event, as a historical narrative? So yeah, what do you think about fantasy as an access point? On the one hand, Jane Yolen uses fantasy and the fairy tale to give us an access point as young readers. But on the other hand, fantasy can be used to distort the way it does with The Boy in the Striped Pajamas. The third thing that this brings up is whose story is it to tell? So I read an article in which John Boyne talked about how The Boy in the Striped Pajamas came to him in a dream, I believe, and he wrote this narrative in like a couple of days with no research. The Jewish identity doesn't really affect him. The intergenerational traumas, bearing witness to trauma, doesn't affect him. Whereas Jane Yolen is Jewish. She is connected to that narrative and more connected to that storyline. My next question is, who is allowed to tell these stories? I think it comes back to something that I've brought up on this channel before, which is appropriation of voice. Who has the right to tell certain stories? Do we all have the right to tell stories? What about when those narratives are really personal and intimate and it's important that they're represented accurately? Can you ever capture that kind of trauma or that passing down of trauma between the generations accurately if you're not intimately tied to that trauma? I've presented two approaches to fantastic Holocaust literature for children. I've asked a lot of questions So I'm really looking to hear from you guys, your thoughts on Holocaust literature for children. Also, if you could leave any recommendations of Holocaust literature for children in the comments down below, I would be super appreciative. I look forward to discussing with you guys. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you soon. Bye.